guys, you're watching Showbiz Monkeys. I'm Eric Hicks. I play Perry in Lifetime's new movie, Girl Taken.
Around this town, I'm alright. Around this town, I'm alright. I mean, no consequence when you playing with the fire. Move to the left.
Hey there, Eric. How have you been doing?
Yeah, great, man. Summer. We survived another winter. Here in Canada,
Yes.
That's a big deal, you know?
It is. Yeah. And I'm right by the arena, so I've been watching the Leafs fans shuffle in for the last bit of hockey of the
Hilarious.
season. But yeah, well, thanks for chatting with me today. Now you mentioned you play Perry in Girl Taken. How would you describe that?
Well, it's a pretty classic Lifetime thriller movie. The only thing I find with this one that's a little different is it's not based on a true story, and so we had the freedom to really dramatize the film and kind of push it to the edges and explore, really push the characters to emphasize, someone watching from home. You can really take in, I don't know how to phrase it. More of like the psychology of the individuals. And so there's a little more internal monologues, things that are happening behind the character's eyes in this film than in a classic Lifetime thriller. And it's a pretty heavy little, a pretty heavy little hitter here.
Yeah. I watched it last night, and it's very intense. It's very intense.
Very intense. Some moments I found, like watching it back myself, I'm like, I wish I had found the love in that moment, like in my relationship with Danny, my partner who is pregnant with my 6-month-old child. And, there's certain scenes I'm like, I wish I had found a little more love in that relationship so the audience would understand why she's there on that journey with me. And, but it's such a fast shooting machine that sometimes you just don't have the time in the moment to find that nuance. And so it is a very intense little thriller. And the character I played, Perry, he's in the most climactic moment of his life. And really going through something really intense here as well. And the other characters as well. Rose, played by Kennedy Rowe, just crushes her part in this movie.
Yeah.
She really went there. She really brought it to the screen. And I'm like, kudos to her. And Erica Durant's playing her mom, had the biggest heart ever and was just so supportive and so loving. And she really just brought out a certain beautiful rawness that only a mother would know for her child.
Yeah.
And I was just very impressed working with those two.
Yeah. There's a lot of passion all throughout that. It really did feel like there's a lot of relationship going, sort of drama between mother and daughter, and the connection of Perry to the family through their deceased father. So there was a lot going on there. Now, how did you did you do anything to prepare to be in that space as Perry? Did you
at
think
first,
yourself up?
In the movie, the original script, Kyle, so Erica Durant's husband in the movie, he was still alive. And, we started off the movie with him and I shooting the shit, working on our trucks. And then the day before we started filming, they killed off Kyle. And then it turned into a story of the past. And so it really changed the dynamic of the relationships in the movie. It changed quite a bit in my mind. So it was really like there's a foundation of Perry that I had to get right. And that foundation was I needed to understand what he was fighting for and what he was running from. And he was really running from isolation and loneliness. And I put it in my mind in his backstory that he didn't have a strong supportive childhood. And, you kind of crave the thing that you're lacking in your childhood. And so for him, more than anything, he wanted to build his own family, have that stability and security. And anything that tries to take that away from him is just like the ultimate threat. And so he just doesn't have the tools to learn how to navigate these situations. And so to understand that part of Perry, that's the most important thing for him, is to really have family, to have a little community, and then loneliness being the thing that he just absolutely does not want more than anything. Then I had to find my way into the heart of Perry. And that heart of Perry is, a fear of being alone. And so for me, I had to find that in my own life. And for me, that's, I think a lot of us can relate, the death of our parents.
Yeah.
And so to really take myself to that place in my mind where when my parents pass away, that immense amount of grief and loneliness and questioning of what is life without family, what is that like? It's a different experience that I don't know yet, but I can imagine it. And so I found my way into Perry's heart through that, being alone, not having family there with him on the journey, and to just have this like desperation in him to try to cling on to whatever sort of, family he can create for himself and a purpose and meaning for living. And, the story just takes it in a certain direction that pushes that to the limit for him and pushes him over the edge. And so, it was, you really had to go to a certain place, and then it's usually out of love or a lack of. And so for him, it's out of a craving for that love and a fear of losing it. And so he'll do anything for it. Yeah.
Now, sort of being in that space and inhabiting, the villain of the film in some way, even though you're finding that through line of how he got there, because any compelling villain is a villain that you can understand how they got to that space. What's it like? What was it like being in that role? What's it like sort of inhabiting that character for the filming of a movie?
Well, the hardest thing I think is, the first 4 days of filming, I did 12 and a half, 13 with lunch, like 13-hour days. And we shot all of my scenes that were at my house in the first 4 days and in the barn. And so it was just like scene after scene after scene after scene. And you can go from a happy little scene, driving in the truck, shooting the shit with Rose, to, the most climactic moment, and then go back to a more light scene. And you're just kind of jumping forward and back through emotions the whole time. And so I think the biggest thing for me was not to have any stimulants on set, no caffeine, no, just to try to keep my body as zenned out as I could and neutral as I could. So, waking up in the morning, doing a little workout, a little meditation, showing up on set, and then just trusting that the work I did will show up. But then for those specific scenes that are a little heightened in intensity, before we shot a scene, before we shot a specific take, I would just have to get myself to that place of imagination where I could put myself in circumstances that were so heightened that they got me to react from, a very sensitive, vulnerable place where the things being said to me really affected me deeply. And, you're just on autopilot in that mode. You're not planning how things are going to come out of your mouth or how you're going to react. You just kind of basically get yourself all jacked up on emotion and then throw it away, and they call action, and whatever happens, happens. And then when that scene's done, you just go, "Ooh," and you're like, okay, now we got to go, and do a happy little scene. And it's, so it's I find acting, especially when you're doing a movie that shoots so fast, it's all about energy management. And one of the biggest mistakes I had made in the past is drinking coffee. You drink coffee and you get all amped up for one scene, but then you crash and you got to do another scene, and you're just like, you're like, okay, yeah, we're happy. It's just impossible. So, I found that, just trying to stay as centered and focused for those days. It's a marathon of energy management.
And when you're done for the day, what did you do to shake off Perry, to like sort of get him out of your system? hot tub.
They had a hot tub down at the hotel, an outdoor hot tub. And so,
Nice.
I'd do a couple hours of scene work, and then I'd go down and I'd literally sit in that hot tub every night for 2 to 3 hours. And,
Wow.
you just sitting there and you're marinating all the ideas of the things you did that day and the things you got to do the next day. And you're staring up at the stars and your body's just becoming a pile of mush. And it
Mhm.
just allows you to get a good sleep and wake up fresh. And I tell you, something about the nervous system regulation, something about a
Mhm.
hot tub that just melts all that stress and anxiety away. And it's like, okay, it's like,
Nice
here
way to
we go again.
relax. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this was filmed in Kelowna, which is a
Right.
beautiful
Oh,
place. I have family there. I've been
okay.
there a couple of times, and
Yeah.
it's got some big spaces and incredible vistas. How do you felt that helped build the atmosphere of Girl Taken?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, when we all showed up on set, my character Perry's house, it's up
Mhm.
on this like wide open, beautiful acreage, you know, 10-minute drive outside of town, overlooking the whole valley. And it just had this kind of arch nemesis villainous type of layer kind of quality to it, where he's up on the
Mhm.
hill overlooking the city, and he's up to no good, but he's hiding, but he's close enough that it's like, it,
Yeah.
it really was the perfect set. It
Mhm.
was the perfect location scout. It was the perfect location scouting. And I think just being there on set, just getting to take in those views, it just gave you a little time to just breathe between takes. And it
Mhm.
really was a character of its own. There was one thing that I wished for that we could have done, is really taken in more just breath and breathing, because the cinematics, the views, the vistas were so beautiful that you
Mhm.
almost wanted to just have the camera on you, just breathing and just
Yeah.
being and just taking in, what's around you. But there wasn't time in this movie for that. It was literally
Mhm.
like, okay, one of the biggest notes we got was just pick it up, pick up the speed. Okay, no, you can't have that
Mhm.
moment there. You can't have that moment. It's like, we got to keep the ball rolling. And it's like, oh, okay, okay. So, we just tried to keep the ball rolling as much as we could. But yeah, those vistas, my God, that's a beautiful part of the planet. Kelowna
Mhm.
special. Yeah, that's nice.
Yes. And like you as you mentioned, is it's you're told to pick it up. It really does feel like once the ball gets rolling, it's just rolling. It's really going when the story starts
Yeah, it
to take
does.
off.
It's not, but it still has that kind of, the pacing still of a true detective kind of,
Hmm.
it's not rambling on, running at you. There's still tension in the
Hmm.
breathing and in the moments, and the internal processing of which way is the character going to go or not go. And so it's got like a slow kind of, still a beat going to it, but a consistent beat going to it until it gets down to the kind of the end. And then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, now things are really unraveling and happening. And
Yeah.
so I found that the same watching True Detective. It's like, oh wow, that first episode was such a slow burn. You're just watching McConaughey and Woody Harrelson just kind of being and talking and philosophizing, and then you get down to it, a few episodes in, and you're like, oh, I'm glad I went on this journey with them, because once that ball gets rolling, you're just so invested in. You're like, ooh, what's going to happen next? And so I felt it had that kind of, that kind of tempo to it, just a little
Hmm.
country vibe, still, still da 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 da, and then wait until Act Two and the end of Act Two, and then it starts really beating and picking up. So
Yeah.
you gotta go on the journey with them.
Now, is there anything that you and the rest of the cast and crew did to sort of like come together or find your like camaraderie during the filming of this?
No, we didn't actually. We showed up on set, and right out the gate on the first day, I had a couple of the my partner Danny played by Tavia Servi, and Kennedy Rowe, who plays Rose. And I just did a little consent talk with them. Like, that wasn't even orchestrated by the set. That I had to take that on myself. And I was like, okay, ladies, I'm like, let's talk consent and boundaries, and let's just get that right up front. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, physically, what are you comfortable with, not comfortable with? Like, face, no touching, no this, no that. And like getting clear on like, what are our personal boundaries? And that was like, okay, I established that out the gate, that we need to have some sort of like safety barrier and find out, what area we're going to play within for this film. Because, with these films, they shoot so fast that nobody else is going to take that initiative on you. That's kind of on you. The onus is on you as the actor to create a comfortable environment. And, some of these scenes are so intense that you really need to be checking in with your acting partner, take by take and scene by scene. And sometimes you get carried away and in the emotion of the scenes, and, there can be a discomfort or someone not feeling the safest. And I'm like, sometimes moments happen and you got to backtrack and be like, are you okay? How are you feeling? Or is that too much? And it's like, okay, you're navigating this together. But I think, just having that awareness on set, that when, as we're navigating these scenes, that you can have those talks and have that communication, that, you're going to be going into some uncomfortable areas and boundaries. But as long as you keep communicating with each other, then you can keep, it's okay. It's like, we can work through this, we can do this. And you have to do that. It's tough, sensitive subject matter. And especially when you're playing the villain, I think it's so important to really have those talks and to really, going forward. I find in the future, really going take by take, checking in with your partner to see where they're at, take by take. You can't take that for granted. You can't not see. You have to see your partner, where they're at, what's happening in the moment, what's happening after they call cut. And you really want to work hard to be a team, to make this machine work, to tell this story. And it's such a nuanced little, skill set that we as actors aren't trained on. We started having intimacy coordinators on set maybe 6 years ago, about 6 years ago. And, it's still new. A lot of sets don't take it. And a lot of sets don't have the luxury of hiring an intimacy coordinator. And so that's something that you, as the actors who aren't really trained on this, have to take it upon yourself to learn and navigate through trial and error as you go through the process. But with Kennedy right out the gate, we started with our shooting our little truck scene, and we had a great relaxed chemistry and energy and a respect for each other and an openness. When we were offset, we could talk about life. And so for her and I, it was just a really safe space to play in. And we had a blast. Like, we just had a blast together. And we're like, we knew how ridiculous it was. And we're like, I'm like, okay. I'm like, are you ready? Here it comes. It was just, we had a blast. And so it was a joy to work with Kennedy. And she showed up and she just kept delivering, take after take. And I'm like, bravo. I'm like, bravo. I'm like, her emotional vulnerability and availability to be there with you. I'm like, I know at her age, I didn't have that awareness of how to, so kudos. Kennedy kicked ass.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for taking the time to chat with me today. And we look forward to watching
Girl Taken.
Girl Taken.